The secret to becoming a music editing pro is one thing, and it's called Tab to Transient. It's a tool inside of Pro Tools that will make your life 10 times easier when it comes to editing music. I'm going to talk about it today in this tutorial. But if you don't have Pro Tools, don't freak out. This is still a useful video for you because a lot of the concepts I'm going to talk about just go beyond this sort of Tab to Transient thing and will help you when it comes to editing music. But let's talk about it. What is Tab to Transient? It's exactly what it sounds like. You zoom into any part of the song, click wherever you want, and when you hit tab on your keyboard, it jumps right to the transient. So I can now very quickly find the downbeats, the upbeats, the kicks, the snare hits, and we can divide the song into sections. So before we get into the tutorial, you're probably wondering what music editing is, how you can use it, why you might need it. I've worked in the music industry, specifically the ad industry, well over 10 years now. And so along those 10 years, I had to do a lot of music editing. That was taking a long form song and trying to fit it into a smaller format, whether that was a commercial, a trailer of some kind, an Instagram ad. And while you could very simply just drop a song in and just fade it out when you need to, that's boring. You know, you want to still have those moments where the song hits, you want to be able to have an intro, a chorus, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why you would want a music edit. If you've ever tried it before, you can know that without, going to the transient or anything like that, it can be really messy and your crossfades can get really ugly. And suddenly the song sounds like it skips and all this weird stuff. This is essentially how you avoid that. And you get a really, really clean music edit so that by the end of it, it sounds like you have a song that was meant to be the length that you're editing to. So let's start. All right, so here I have my track. Cool. It's just a normal track. You'll see that there's obviously different sections just by looking at the waveform. The first thing I like to do is just start dividing the song into different sections using the Tab to Transient tool. So obviously we have our intro here. It's like a bit of a minimal thing. And I see that the waveform gets a little bit more intense here. So I'm going to listen. There's a little fill. And there's a one right there. The song continues up to here is kind of like a verse. Looks like we have a bit of a difference here. So I like to visually sort of start thinking about where these songs change. Okay, so I've got that's one. So I might be moving a little quick, but you'll see what I'm doing here in a second. I'm always trying to find the one of the next section. So I should be able to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Now I can let that roll. Now I'm obviously going to have another section here. Same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a 1. And I can just click again anywhere. Tab to Transient. I cut it. 1, 2, 3, 4. So obviously you just go ahead and do this for the whole song. Just go section by section. I'm going to do that now. All right, so I've got my song broken up by different sections. I've purely gone around just listening to and visually kind of seeing where things cut, and I just cut by the transient. The next thing I like to do is get myself a little organized by naming each individual section. This will make it easier for me to later on just play with all the different sections and just be able to slide them in. Before you do anything to your track, I recommend either duplicating your track or if you're in Pro Tools, come over here to this little arrow and duplicate your playlist. That way you can go back and listen to the original edit that you had. The next thing I like to do is go through and name each individual section. So whenever you have like an intro, a verse, a pre-chorus, chorus, all that kind of stuff, I'm going to want to name it. And I personally like to color code it. That way in future songs or future edits, I know, for example, for me, the chorus is always going to be a certain color and the intro is going to be a certain color. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and I'll be right back. All right, so we're back. And as you can see, I've tried to color everything into different sections and I've named everything. So we've got our intro, starts like an intro. I've got my verse, things kick in a little bit more. I've got my pre, things come down a little bit. And then naturally I have my chorus. I've also gone ahead and marked certain things like a fill, stuff like that. For this second chorus, I also like to make note of any time a song reintroduces like a new section or a new instrument. So in this case, the chorus is twice as long. Starts off normal, but the second time around, they add a higher horn. So we might want to use that if we want like a bigger chorus. We've also got a little bit of a riser here. And we also have like a single big hit here, which I wanted to also separate in case I need something like that. Chorus 3 is the biggest chorus, just ever so slightly has a little bit more going on, so I marked it as such. And I always like to cut the very end. Not every song is going to have a definitive ending. Sometimes they just kind of fade out. So this doesn't always work, but I highly, highly recommend always cutting the ending. In this case, it's just a little bit of a offbeat hit there. So I do this now because I can now shuffle around the song in using different sections, almost as if they were loops. You have to start thinking of them as loops so that you can very easily just kind of try different things. Now, in this case, we know we're trying to get our song to 30 seconds. So we're going to do that. We're going to want the intro. And so we're going to keep that where it is. It's pretty good, but it might be a little bit long. I actually think the second half of the intro is more interesting, so I'm going to cut it there. So I'm splitting the intro in half because it has a little cowbell that comes in that makes it more interesting. So if I wanted to be interesting right from the get-go, I would use this section. Now, if you're in Pro Tools, you're going to want to use shuffle mode here. Make sure this is selected shuffle mode, because what that does is that when you select a section and you hit delete, it's going to slide out anything that follows it to the place it was previously in. So if I hit delete on this, everything slides over. So now I just have this, and we go straight into the verse, right? Verse is a little long. We don't have enough time to really go through because we're almost hitting the 15-second mark here. So now the intro just kind of feels like a natural start and builds into the first verse. Now, as you can see, the first verse is a little bit too long. If this was a normal song, cool, fine, but it's not. And so we're going to want to cut it. So there I'm counting 8. So let's do this again. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. On this one, I'm going to tab the transient there again. Get rid of all of this. And it would make sense that we would go into the pre here. So if we cut it, you'll see that it's almost like it's staying on a grid. You don't even have to actually figure out the tempo to the song you're editing because you've already kind of cut to the specific transient. So it's always going to stay in time whenever you shuffle. We'll just go straight in here. Little riser. So I want to use the second half again because it's more interesting and it leads better into the first chorus. So let's count this out again. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. I'm going to want to use that. Again, shuffle, cut that out. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now this first chorus is cool, but I think we want something bigger. We have two options. We could either go to our third chorus, which is just slightly bigger. There's a little bit more rhythmic stuff going on there. Or we can go to our chorus B, which I had noted had another horn on top, which we could do. Now, we could even go for a mix of the two. We could leave chorus 1 as is. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And then right here, we could tab the transient and try to see what would happen if we went into our beat chorus. We can cut out all of this because we know we're not going to be using it because we only have 30 seconds. Cut it out. You're going to see this should transition fairly nicely. Nice. We have a problem. We're already at 30 seconds and we need to end this somehow. There's a couple different ways to do this. we essentially have two different endings here that we could use. There's a riser over here, which kind of works as an ending, or we have our actual ending. Because we're short on time, I think we might have to use that one, but let's see how this works. So this is where we would have to find a natural place to cut it. We're not going to be able to complete the phrase, so we have to find somewhere that we're going to have to compromise a little bit. We want to leave enough time for the tail of the end to just kind of trail off. We could probably do it there. Let's see what happens. If we cut out here. It's a little weird. Let's see if we can fix this up. Sometimes I like to move the individual clips to see. So that's not going to work as well as I wanted it to. So in this case, we're not going to be using the ending, but I did like what this riser had to offer. It's a little bit, the melody there is gone, so it's kind of cool because it might let us play around with that transition, and we can get away with more. So we have our second chorus. So we had said that maybe we cut that out. Let's see what happens here. So that might be a little bit much. We might have to cut that in half as well. Let's see what happens. So that's a little tight for me, so we're gonna have to try something else. So let's see what happens if we just cut it in half. So that should leave us enough time to now bring this in. Let's see if we can give it a little bit more natural transition. Let's get rid of that. And then we can end it right there. End it right there on the 30-second mark. We can get rid of all of this now. And let's listen. There's still some cleaning up that we have to do, but I think we're in a good place for now. So at this point, you can see you can do a lot with this method of music editing. I managed to get a song that was originally about 2 minutes and 40 seconds down to 30 seconds, and I made it sound fairly natural. As you can imagine, there's probably a bunch of different ways that you can cut this by using different sections. And it's almost like a bit of a creative sort of approach that you can take because, like I said, if you start thinking of these different sections as loops, you can then sort of get really creative with how you cut stuff and how you transition from one section to another. I recommend then just going in and cleaning up the files, doing a little bit of crossfading, making sure that everything's nice and clean. There's no big pops and clicks. But generally, that is how you should approach your music editing. This is just part one in a little series I'm going to make about music editing. On the next episode, what we're going to try to do is show you how you can transition from one song into a completely different song seamlessly. But that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions whatsoever, I will be replying to any questions in the comments. So just drop one, or if you appreciate it, drop one as well. Like and subscribe, all that fun stuff. Thanks for watching and stay tuned.